Hi everyone. On November 19th, the Holy Orthodox Church celebrates the memory of the great Saint Varlaam of the Kievan caves. Now, Saint Varlaam was present during the very beginnings of the Kievan caves with Saint Anthony, the founder of Russian monasticism, as he is often called, and Saint Theodosius, who is also could be considered his co-equal in this effort. Now, everyone is probably familiar with the Kievan caves, which are exactly that, a long and deep area of cave dwellers in Russia near Kiev, where many ascetics early on found salvation in our Lord Jesus Christ. Saint Varlaam, however, was of a very rich family, a noble family. In fact, his father John was known as one of the great warriors of the time. And as such, it was expected that Saint Varlaam would, of course, take up his father's mantle one day and continue the lineage and the reputation of his house. However, Saint Varlaam early on became very attracted to Saint Anthony and Theodosius and the things that were happening in the caves. He loved the quietness that he found there, the peacefulness, and longed for it very greatly. And in fact, it was such that he went and spoke to Saint Anthony one day and expressed his very great need to become a monk. And Saint Anthony said, well, here's the thing. This is a one-time shot for you. If you leave all of this behind, you've got to make sure that you're not going to be attracted by the pleasures of the world. Because once you put your hand to the plow, it's not good to look back. And St. Varlaam took this very deeply into consideration, yet it did not dissuade him from wanting to become a monk. And so, not long after that, he left his house. He left his betrothed wife and his family and all his fortune, and in fact mounted a horse in great regalia with his servants and everything else, and marched up to the cave where St. Anthony lived. And many of the brethren that were in the cave at that time came out to greet the very important personage. Yet St. Varlaam dismounted his horse. He bowed down before the holy St. Anthony, and here he said, I have given up the things of the world and all of its temptations. I lay before you all my regalia. He took out all of his aristocratic robes, his horse, everything, and threw them at the feet of the saint, and said, I wish to become a monk. And St. Anthony, in his wisdom, replied, well, just remember this, that if by some chance your family comes to forcibly take you back, we have no means to defend you at all. And so you've got to keep this in mind. And St. Anthony said, well, we will accept you then. St. Varlaam replied, please, tonsure me as a monk as soon as possible. And so he had one of the other monks there tonsure St. Varlaam and receive him into the brotherhood. Well, as you might guess, when his father heard about this, he was not at all pleased, and in fact he did send a large contingent of soldiers to the caves, and they did capture Varlaam. They took him, they dressed him back in his regalia, put him on his horse, and set out for home. St. Varlaam, during the time, though, as he was sitting on the horse, would pull these clothes off of himself and throw them down into the mud. And so they had to keep dressing him again and again. And finally, Varlaam reached home. And his father was very concerned about him and said, you're not living up to your responsibilities. Well, he also had his betrothed wife come to him, who dressed very seductively and tried to capture him and keep him there and say, please, stay here with me. And it was quite alluring to St. Varlaam, but he did not give in. And so his father had him locked in a room for 3 days, whereas St. Varlaam decided to fast for that time. And finally, his father John's heart began to soften when he saw the great devotion of his son. He was also fearful that the young man might injure himself from this severe fasting of not eating or drinking anything. And so he went to Varlaam, and he bowed before him and said, "Forgive me," in the most generous tones that a father could. And he relinquished his hold on his son. And his betrothed wife was in tears, even his servants were in tears, as Varlaam left and headed back to St. Anthony's cave. But Varlaam himself was exceedingly light and joyous and just could not wait. And in fact, when he got back there and became part of the brotherhood, he advanced in virtue so quickly that the others were all astonished. His love for Christ was evident in every move that he made, everything that he did, so that St. Anthony, finally wanting to give up the burden of the overseeing of so many monks in the caves, recommended that Varlaam replace him and become the abbot. All the brotherhood agreed and elected Varlaam as the abbot, where St. Anthony then went a distance away and dug another cave where he would live the remainder of his days. Under St. Varlaam, the caves blossomed. Many good things happened, so fast, really, that St. Varlaam realized that they didn't have enough room for all the monks that were coming there. So he built a great church in honor of the Dormition of the Mother of God, a giant cathedral, which opened things up a lot, and finally the caves became visible to everyone else around. At that time, the great Prince Dmitri, as he was known in baptism, came and decided that it would be good if St. Varlaam would also help him in the erection of yet another cathedral, which was in honor of St. Demetrius of Thessalonica, who was Dimitri's patron. He chose St. Varlaam to become the abbot of this new monastery in order that it may also flourish because of his previous reputation. Well, at that time, St. Varlaam, who was advancing in years at that point, once everything was set in order in the new monastery, went to the Holy Land to venerate all of the holy places, which is something he had long wanted to do. And after he returned, he also went to Constantinople and was able to acquire many holy things for the Caves Monastery and for the new cathedral of St. Demetrius of Thessalonica. After a while, he finally reposed during that second journey from Constantinople in the city of Vladimir, and he had indicated that his bones were to be laid to rest in the Kiev caves, which indeed they were. In fact, his relics are there to this day, remaining incorruptible as a sign and testimony of his love of the Lord and of the Lord's glorification of him. Bye-bye.